and welcome to ComicPop Returns. I'm Tiffany, and today we've got something special for you. We've done interviews, we've done conversations on this channel, we've done reviews, we've done lists, all of it. But today we wanted to talk a little bit more about the behind the scenes of how comics get made, and not just any comic, but in particular, The Hunger and the Dusk. I love this book. I love the world that's been created. And now we get to peek back behind the curtains and find out how we got there. Because today I am joined by the creative team behind it, Willow, Chris and Michelle, who are writer, artist, and colorist on the book. And I am thrilled to have you all. I think we're going to kick it off wherever this all started.
It was kind of percolating for a long time. I am a longtime player of various massive multiplayer online games, World of Warcraft, the Elder Scrolls series, all of that good stuff. And for a long time, I've been really fascinated by the way that the depiction of orcs has changed over time from sort of like a Tolkien-esque, creepy, semi-intelligent, goopy, disposable villain to, somebody like Thrall in World of Warcraft, who's kind of a tragic hero and quite buff and does all these cool spells and things like that. And that evolution was really interesting to me. I didn't think about it in too much detail, but it was always kind of there as I was playing and building my characters and that kind of thing. And then the pandemic came around, everything shut down. A lot of comic book stores kind of went on hiatus. A lot of projects went on hiatus. Distribution all changed. And so I started finding myself at kind of loose ends. I had to quit about half of my workload and teach my kids how to read and write because there was no school really for a year and a half. And it was kind of in the spare moments when I wanted to give myself a break from the apocalypse, I started thinking about this book that kind of brought together a lot of the ideas about the evolution of orcs as characters, and wove it into this kind of ecological apocalypse that looks a lot more like the one that we're dealing with. I think, we've seen various kinds of apocalypses, in fantasy literature over the years. Famously, winter is coming and all of this stuff. But usually they don't quite resemble what's actually happening around us. And there was a point where in Seattle, during the worst of the pandemic, we couldn't be inside because everything was closed because we had to distance from each other. But we also couldn't be outside because we were having one of these successive horrific forest fire seasons. And we had the worst air quality on planet Earth. And so it really felt like a descent into hell. And so I kind of was like curled up with my laptop, and out of it came this idea for this epic saga about orcs and humans having to band together against a common foe, but also being forced into proximity by an ecological apocalypse that neither of them knows how to fight. And at first I was like, nobody's going to publish this book. This is just sort of like, a thought experiment. But a year in, I had 2 generations of story gamed out. So not just the characters that you see currently in Hunger and the Dusk, but their children as well. Oh. And so when Mark at IDW was like, hey, do you have any ideas for, create our own series? Do you have any non-sort of superhero stuff percolating? And I was like, as a matter of fact, I do. You might think I'm crazy, but I'm going to tell you. And I pitched it, and Mark was like, sounds great. So really, it just came out of a very YOLO, life is too short, pitch the hot orc book mentality. And, and the rest is history. I'm really grateful to IDW to putting together this creative team because, as soon as Chris's name was suggested and he started sending in these kind of rough ideas, I was like, oh my God, this is incredible. Yeah, and Michelle as well, brings like a real depth and a level of storytelling that I think sometimes might be invisible to the readers, but it's happening on a subconscious level with the colors to show us changes in climate, changes in time of year, like just all sorts of amazing stuff. So It really has been a complete joy to work on, and I'm just happy that everybody took a chance on it.
I am too, honestly. Like, I am truly thankful to IDW for like going like, yes, let's make this happen, because I love this book. So you pitch the book. What are the next steps? Do you start writing outlines? Do you start writing scripts? Do they immediately start trying to pair you up with artists, colorists? What happens next?
Yeah, so I wrote a pitch, and when that got approved, I started working on an outline. I used to not like to outline, but I've really come to appreciate in the last few years how vital they are for episodic storytelling. And in particular, when you're building a world from scratch, you really need to keep a handle on the pacing. The pace is very important. It's easy to get bogged down in detail, and then everything slows down, or to rush through things. So keeping that pace feeling natural and feeling like it has momentum is a real challenge. So I started outlining, and Mark Doyle at IDW began suggesting artists. Chris was at the top of that list. And I'd known him from his work in the Bat office. And I thought he was great. What I didn't realize was that he is such a consummate world builder. And I have just, I've said this on several different interviews. So if I'm repeating myself to anybody who's heard me talk about this before, I apologize. But, you see in the book, you see that a character is wearing armor, for example. Chris hasn't just gamed out that armor. He knows what they're wearing underneath the armor. He knows what all of the little decorations mean on every little piece of the thing. He'll be like, okay, this is original, and this they would have picked up, just kind of as scrap, and it's like a relic from one of the other civilizations that has gone extinct, and this and that. Or, a few weeks ago, randomly, he was like, so I made an alphabet. I made an orc alphabet. Here it is. Here's everybody's name in this orc
alphabets.
2 alphabets. That's right. Yeah. Oh, my God. So just absolutely wild about the world building. And then Michelle was Chris's idea. He was that was the only name. Michelle's name was the only name that he brought forward. He was like, Michelle. And I was like, great. Yeah. If you like her, I like her.
Yeah. So Chris, did you get a call? Did you get an email? Was it like, did they pitch it to you? Like, hey, we have this project.
Yeah. So similar, I had Mark Doyle get in touch, who I'd worked with on Batgirl when I was doing stuff for DC. He working on film concept art at the time, and he just came firing out of the blue. I hadn't spoke to him in, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 years, because I've been doing other DC stuff. And then he just popped up on my email just saying, hey, I'm starting up this new thing with IDW. And he just said, what do you want to work on? And I gave him it, because I was kind of, did want to go back to comics, but I wasn't super, if I was going to come back to comics from film stuff, I wanted to do something I really wanted to do. So I just gave him like this bucket list of stuff that I wanted to do. And I was looking to do something with loads of world building, either fantasy or post-apocalyptic stuff. And if we're going to do it, I either want to do it as a graphic novel, so you do the whole thing in one go and then it comes out, or just make sure we have lots of time to do it. And they've been so good with all of that. And he was just like, have you read my emails, because I've got exactly this project that fits all of that criteria? And I was just like, and he said, and also Willow's right in it, and I was like, you had me at Willow, like this.
With a project of this scope, how do you even start? You're like part of this growing world. Are you like, all right, I'm gonna start developing like lands, I'm gonna start developing characters? Like, how do you start?
Well, at the beginning, I have to say, I tried to be a little bit precious about the world. I was like, we're not going to do a map. We're just going to, because it should feel, it should feel continuously strange. Like we're not sort of trying to throw you into like a GRRM place. It should feel like a world that is shrinking, that is becoming a little bit claustrophobic, that has forgotten more than it remembers. And so I didn't make a map. That lasted maybe 4 or 5 months. And then we were all like, we need a map. It's ridiculous to do something like this without a map.
Yeah.
So, now we've got a map. But we do have there's more blank space than there is filled in space, because the idea is there used to be many more civilizations in this world than there are now.
Mm-hmm.
But as the ecology and the climate has collapsed, they've either left for lands unknown and we've never heard from them again, or they've gone extinct and their whole cities are in ruins. And there's desertification happening, which is pushing everybody kind of together. So a very small part of this map is filled in. Also, as we were building, I started adding bits and pieces from our email conversations to the Bible.
Okay.
Which was just so that we all keep track of things, like here's the, like the orc dynasties that we've mentioned so far. And here's the landmarks that Chris has worked in, and Michelle came up with like subtly different color schemes for like the different peoples and guilds and civilizations and all this stuff. So I put all of that in one document so that we could keep track of it, but it was very much on the fly.
You're over there, you're writing, you're scripting. Chris is working on pages, character designs. Michelle, I got to get you in here. When you think about fantasy worlds, I mean, really any world, but particularly fantasy worlds, I feel personally like color palette is super important, because it's one thing to take like New York City, an established place, and like do a spin on it, or like, adjust things here and there. You're literally coming in and going like, this is the look for these people, this is the look for this place. How do you wrap your brain around picking palettes throughout an entire land and make them feel cohesive but feel different enough?
Well, I need to give credit that the heavy lifting has been done mostly by Chris, because he has actually established, because he has all the history and the makings of the characters, and so he sort of differentiated all of that for me already, and my job was more to place them into the environment and be able to sell the cohesiveness and sort of ground them in that world. And so I think with some art direction with Chris, we talk about the seasonality, the vibe we're going for, the atmosphere. For example, Willow had mentioned forest fires. Like, we had one issue where it was very gray, very smoky, a lot of ash and sparks interacting with that. So it's mostly about creating believable natural seeming environments, but also integrating and creating this maybe eerie light or eerie atmosphere around them, just to say that, hey, this is a fantastical world. It's not based in reality, but it looks totally like reality.
It's so true. It really like brings another level, this life to the page. Now, do you work traditionally? Do you work digitally? What's your preference?
I work digitally primarily. Okay. It's just so flexible for creating depth within each element, I guess. So I'll color the characters separately, and then I'll color in the environment separately. And then what I do is do a compositing layer for both of them, just to pull them in together. So that could be use of like filters or lighting layers that has, will make something shiny, for example, or will make something seem dusty or hidden in atmosphere. And Chris and I go back, sometimes with that too, because, certain elements need to be pushed just to help with storytelling. Sure. And it's so much collaborating that I love all the teamwork that goes into this.
That's so great. Chris, do you work digitally or do you work traditionally?
Mainly digitally, yeah. I tend to do my like thumbnails and sketches and stuff like that on pencil and paper, but I'll do everything digitally these days, just because it's so easy and I can make it look a bit better. Mess around with it quite a bit.
The undo button is priceless, hey?
Yeah, no, it's the reason why I'm so late all the time. I just can't, if I had that undo button taken away, I'd probably be a bit quicker.
I've heard of a lot of digital artists who go back to do some traditional stuff, trying to like zoom in on their pages after being used to being able to do so on a digital tablet.
Yeah, I have my undo button attached, like hotkeyed onto my pen. So every time I pick up a normal brush or a pen, I'm always just slightly tapping the end of my pen to undo a line before I start rubbing it out.
That's so good.
Yeah.
So, Willow, was there a moment when you got some art back when you like were like, this is all coming together? Like, was it an early sketch? Was it an early page? Like, was there's like this like aha moment where you're like, this is gonna be great?
Oh my gosh. Like I have to say, I started getting chills the minute that Chris started sending in concept art, to be honest. Because the story was something very fully formed in my head, but the look that you give that story can really pull the vibe and sort of the emotional tenor of the book in one direction or another. And I was super curious to see where Chris would take it. And like I don't know how other writers work, but when I get paired with an artist and a colorist, I will make subtle adjustments to work to their style and their strengths. Because, I think there's really nothing worse than a comic book that looks like it was kind of cooked up in a game of telephone, that, like there's it doesn't really gel, that maybe the writer is going for one point of view and the artist has a totally different point of view, and everything just, even if everybody's really good at their job, it just kind of looks a bit chunky. And when Chris started sending in concept art, and there were like all of these, layers, and like, this is, when they take off the jacket, this is what's underneath, and this and that, I was like, oh, we are cooking now. We are cooking now.
Stop.
It was really cool because, it meant that we could make the world very lived in, which is a key element, I think, for a story like this. A lot has to be communicated without words, because you don't have the luxury in a comic book of having 2- and 3-page digressions where you're just explaining, oh, this battle happened 500 years ago, and because of this, these people came. You can do that in prose. You do not have that bandwidth in comics. So what you have to do is leave visual clues that tell you this is where we are. This is maybe what happened before. You do that through placing background errata, like, here's a tumble down ruin and it looks like this. Here are these statues, and my gosh, it looks kind of religious, but we're not sure from where. So, if you go through each page of the book, and I encourage people to do this, if you're reading month to month, I do this too. It's easy to get a comic book and kind of blitz through it, and because you want to know what happens, and then you get to the end. This book really rewards a reread where you can go back and see, like, oh my gosh, I've seen that symbol somewhere else, or we've been to these ruins before, but it was a different season. There's tons of background stuff like that through which you can construct this world that we're operating in, like, without the need for the 3-page digression about the 500-year-old battle or whatever it is. Which I love. I love those. I'm not knocking them. It's just you don't have room. You don't have room in a comic book.
No, completely fair. Completely fair. I have to say, 100%, you are correct about there needing to be a cohesion between art style and the style of book the writer is going for. And I feel like you're fully supporting Willow in her vision. But along those same lines, like I'm no artist, but I will say that, like, there is something to be said about a colorist who can elevate the art instead of competing with it. And you have you guys have such a cohesion and just a perfect blend of, like, where Chris's inks end and your coloring begins. Have you worked before on projects together?
This is our first
Chris,
time, isn't it, Michelle, I think?
Yeah, this is our first time, but we both share history, I guess, in the Batman universe because we're connected through Mark Doyle. I was on Gotham Academy, who Carl Kerschel drew, and we did Isola together afterwards, which was my first big break into high fantasy. I've not colored fantasy before that. And so I think, Chris, you may have discovered my work through Isola. Am I correct?
Gotham Academy. Yeah, no.
Oh, it was Gotham Academy?
Okay. Yeah. Because, that was I was working in comics when Gotham Academy was coming out, and then.
Well, you did like an issue in there, I think.
Yeah, I did 2 short story pieces for it, 2 separate short story ones. But we didn't work together on that. It was the sort of one-off story things that were I think the yearbook and something else. It was like a maps thing I did with James Tinian. But that was years ago, and that was, I think you guys were already on volume 4, I think, or something like that, or 3 or 4. So you'd already been way well established, and I was a massive fan of your work way before. Way
thank you.
Before. So
I really thought it was Isola that got you like all inspired, because that was just, it's so kind of in the same realm of fantasy, right? Like very painterly, very atmospheric. Yeah.
I think I've said before in other stuff, like this, Isola was the book that when I went into this, I wanted it to be a flavor of that. And I always have Michelle's color. I'm going to fan out here, Michelle, but I've always got your little coloring book on there, because I always refer to that quite a bit. And so it's Isola and Michelle's work was already like high up there on an influence for this book, and me going in, and Kyle's work as well. But definitely Michelle was a sort of
thank you, Chris.
one thing that I really wanted to bring over into this.
That's so great. So speaking of influences, now I know, Willow, you were inspired by games. Chris, where is your fantasy inspiration coming from? There's something about the way you've designed the characters in the world that simultaneously feels like I've never seen this before, and yet feels very comfortable.
I wouldn't say it's one particular thing, because there's so many sort of fantasy things. I mean, I'm more of a big like fantasy fiction. I'm more of a fantasy novel fan. So I'm a big fan of like Joe Abercrombie and Patrick Rothfuss's fantasy and stuff.
But
I don't know. It's kind of, I just wanted it to have a feel of something different. So I've kind of tried to not just draw from too much stuff that I like directly. Like no, like I didn't want the orcs to look like sort of World of Warcraft orcs. I wanted them to look a bit like, I think I was trying to aim for like a Na'vi type, like, you know, the Avatar Na'vi characters. I was kind of like aiming on them being something like a bit of a softer orc. The orcs are kind of all influenced by sort of ancient Mongolian warriors and stuff and tribes. And then the humans are sort of more Western knights and a bit of like Italian sort of feel to them in some ways. But we haven't seen a lot of the humans yet, but that's probably what we'll maybe a bit more. I'm not sure yet.
Yeah. So when you guys are coming up with, you know, new ideas for the book, has it, at this point, it feels like it's, you know, there's like this perfect flow. It feels like you guys have, like, I hate to use the word synergy because it's just like, what does that even honestly mean at this point? But like, there really does seem to be this like incredible connection from like Willow's words and, you know, your storylines and the threads and everything, right into Chris's art, into the colors. Like when you guys are pitching ideas, does it just feel like you're in this flow state?
It can, yeah. Like usually when Chris and Michelle are talking, I just kind of listen. I mean, I'm not, you know, listening to their phone calls like the CIA, but, you know, if there's an email thread, you know, I just kind of, you know, watch their back and forth, and we'll calibrate as needed. You know, like, for example, dependent on the way that Chris makes a certain orc family look and the way that Michelle will be like, okay, their color scheme is sort of more yellows and oranges, and these guys are kind of more blues and greens. You know, that helps me decide how much detail do we need to get into, you know, with actual verbiage, with actual words to explain the differences between these families, and how much can we jump, you know, right into the conflict. Hopefully the end product feels very naturalistic, because the goal is that you can kind of sense, okay, you know, like these families have this conflict and, you know, there's tension over here. You know, they're dressed differently dependent on where they're from, you know, whether they're kind of a water-going family or they live up in the hills or what have you. And so it really helps, I hope, the series feel very organic, without a lot of the stuff that I think often trips up secondary world stories where you're like, well, as you know, my father and your father whose names were comma, comma and comma, did this, that, and the other. I was like, yes. And as you will have heard, XYZ, just it helps us kind of minimize those awkward asides and jump right into it, which, it's not easy to do. It might look easy. Hopefully it looks easy, but it's not actually easy.
I can tell you 100% you do make it look effortless, because the pacing of this book is absolutely incredible. You guys are hitting it on every conceivable level of just making an incredible product that is not just something for purchase, but it is something that is it's just a beautiful story. Like I am always thrilled when it comes out, and I cannot wait to open it up and read what's happening next and see all the visuals and just experience this like world of like beautiful color that you guys have put on the page. Is absolutely incredible. When you have like new pages, what does the workflow look like? Like if someone was like interested in how comics go from like outline script to final product, like how long does it take and how many steps? Because I feel like there's probably more than people think.
It really depends. Oftentimes I'll send in a script, and then Chris will, in some scenes, make adjustments to the flow of the panels, which means sometimes I will then go back in before lettering and kind of tweak the script a little bit to move the dialogue around appropriately. Like if Chris wants a little bit more decompression in a scene, there might be an added panel, or, on the other hand, he might want to say, well, like, let's put this together and make it like a half-page splash or something. So usually it's kind of a round robin. I'll send in a script and then Chris works off of that. I'll go back in and tweak some of the dialogue. Michelle puts on the color, and somewhere between, art and color, the lettering will go in. And then we all take a look at that last, phase where everything's lettered and laid out. So we can say like, ooh, I really try to, like, as I've said, not ramble on and on, because you don't want those dialogue balloons to feel obtrusive to the reading experience. You want to get as much of that kind of background as you can. It's never identical. I feel like one issue to the next. It really depends on, like how many action scenes there are, how much is tweaked.
If you give me too many animals for people to ride, then it slows the issue.
Oh yes, that's a huge thing in fantasy comics. Is like minimize the writing scenes, because this is universal in my experience. There is nothing an artist hates more than having to draw writing animals. Horses. I've never met an artist who likes drawing horses. They are a pain in the backside.
Yeah. You know what? I actually quite like drawing the animals on this and stuff, because we've gone kind of a bit more outlandish with them. But it is just that I do slow down quite a lot. I mean,
it's doubling the characters every time there's a writing scene, because you've got a character and a horse type. Well, it's an ox, but yeah.
A four-legged, there's 2 extra legs.
Yeah, there's some strategic long tails that cover up back legs.
That's right. Half portraits, or it's like chest up.
Yeah, horses and wheels, like bicycles or anything wheels in perspective. Is
minimize transportation is the takeaway from this.
Minimize transportation.
I love that. That's such a good tip.
The worst.
Bikes, are they worse than horses? Bikes?
God.
I think so.
So I draw a few horses or a set of bicyclists.
Okay, no bicycles. I'm going to put that in my little notebook.
Obviously, one of the issues in the future, you're going to need a series of horses riding bicycles. I think that's clearly.
That's right.
Don't.
I quit.
Yeah.
Michelle, do you feel the same way? Like in terms of coloring, are there any pages that like you're like, just like, yes, I cannot wait to color this, or are there some that like slow you down a little bit? Is it things with a lot of detail?
Gosh, I'm actually excited about mostly every scene, because there's just like a different texture that you could put on everything. But the fighting scenes are interesting because they're left a little more abstract. Like Chris, you won't generally draw backgrounds in if there's like a huge splash page of things coming out, because you don't want it to be distracting, right? And so the part that drains me is like, okay, how do I create a lot of motion and like vibrancy and also some textures in it to make it seem like it's intense and it's moving? And so there's a lot of experimentation that goes on with that, and the color just needs to be turned up a little more. You'll see I'll use a lot of blurry effects and like a lot of particle effects that explode in the background, and then it will get hit with a really, really intense color to pop it. But you know, I love coloring those scenes, but it's funny, they're simpler, but they also take a lot longer in some ways.
I like that, you know, coloring is a beautiful art, but there's also an element of like, you know, problem solving and finding a solution.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very tactical, very psychological. If I could spend double the time I could on each book, like that would be perfect for me. Actually, Chris, kind of like you, like releasing a trade paperback and just spending a lot of time per chapter, because then you could really build on what exists and then create a script that, you know, flows even more seamlessly within each event.
I love that. Well, obviously what we need to do is we need to convince IDW to do an oversized recolored version of it and give you all the time, and then
that would be amazing.
We'll get on that.
Yeah.
I did want to remind everyone that, you know, this book is up to issue 5. Issue 6 is coming out on February 14th, and the collection is going to be coming out on June 11th. I have all the issues. I'm still going to get the collection. I'm that person. I'm like, how many ways can I own a series? Because I will take them all. Please give them to me. Have my money. But I also wanted to just, you know, just the throwaway kind of like random thing. Is there anything right now that's like inspiring you, making you happy? Like, what is your thing right now? Is it a comic, a game, a book, a show? I don't know, a meme.
I'm super stoked for the new season of True Detective.
Ooh.
Oh my God, I was just going to say.
Yes, isn't it great?
Yes.
Oh my gosh, no, I love that series. And I, you know, speaking of climate change, I love a good Arctic horror story.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's really good. Yeah, it's one of those things where I'm like, it's not enough just to watch the episode. I have to then go look for like the podcasts that are talking about it to get me through the next week.
I love it. How about you, Chris?
I've just been rewatching Arcane series.
Oh.
I watched it now, and the new season's coming out this year. I think the trailer for it came out the other day. But I love that so much. And it's just one I can put on in the background and stuff. But I love it.
Yeah,
it's like that show gets me.
How about you, Michelle? Or is it also True Detective?
It's mostly True Detectives and discovering movies again. My kid is now a toddler, so I feel like, you know, I'm a little more free these days. I could go actually enjoy a movie, and I recently saw Godzilla, and it was so beautiful. It was so good. Highly recommend to anyone who hasn't seen it.
Excellent. Wait, which one? Just out of curiosity.
Minus one.
Everyone keeps talking about that one. I have not had a chance to see it, but everyone is like, it's unbelievable.
It's not disappointing. It won't disappoint you, and the budget for it is insane once you find out how much it costs to create.
Oh yeah, all right.
Yeah.
Well, I'm gonna have to go see that. Absolutely. All right. Well, thank you all so much for taking some time out of your incredibly busy days to talk a little bit about the behind the scenes for Hunger in the Dusk. Seriously, you've heard me. This is not even because they're all sitting here with me, because obviously, you know, I want to be positive, but everyone knows I do love this series. I do highly recommend it. Either go back and get them all. Just go back and get them all. Then go and get the first volume on June 11th. You will not be disappointed whatsoever. Honestly, users rated it the #1 title on Comic Book Roundup. So, I mean, come on. If you're not going to take my opinion, take other people's opinions as well, and just go get the book. But thank you so very much for joining me. You know, we'll have details down below for where you can find everyone's socials, if you guys have them, because, you know, that's a weird topic nowadays. But if you have them, that'll be all down there. And go follow these people. They're incredibly talented. Again, thank you also for being here and for creating this incredible book. I really do love it. So,
Thank you for having us.
Oh, no,
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
So thanks everybody for watching, and we'll see you guys next time on ComicPop Returns. Bye.